I'm going through all the comments, and I just wanted to answer a question I've seen like 10 times now. I did not go to the wedding. I didn't want to leave my son alone while most of the family was away, and it just didn't feel right going to the wedding after what happened. 6 months ago, my son Leo, a 14-year-old, decided to cut off my brother Jack, who is 46 years old. Now my mom, brother, sister-in-law, and other family members want me to make my son forgive him to keep the peace. For a little bit of context, I'm a 46-year-old single dad. My family has always helped me in many ways, mostly babysitting when Leo was younger, and even before my son was born, we were all very close. We all live relatively close to each other, so we've been able to keep in touch with weekly gatherings, spending the holidays together, etc. Everyone loves my son, and my son loved them back. However, my brother Jack was always my son's favorite person. Back when my son was 3 to 4 years old, Jack and his wife had more flexible jobs than me. Think freelancing versus a 9 to 5. So they always volunteered to look after Leo, something he loved. Almost every month, they would take him to the zoo or the aquarium, or they'd even go camping with him. As my son grew older, he started to develop the same interests as my brother, like video games, photography, and music. When Leo was 9, he told me he wanted to have the same career as his uncle. This is all to say, they were extremely close. Last year, my brother informed me that he and his girlfriend Mary were getting married. I knew that neither Jack nor his girlfriend believed in marriage, so when I asked them about it, they told me it was all Karen's idea, my sister-in-law's mom. Because Jack and Mary didn't care much about the wedding, and since Karen was paying for it, they let her plan everything, from the venue to the food, music, etc. Karen decided to plan a destination wedding at a fancy resort. In July of last year, we received the invitation, and it was addressed to both me and my son. I even had a +1 if I wanted. And as soon as the website went up, I tried to make a reservation for our hotel room. I should clarify that I had to call the hotel to make my reservation because the link wasn't working, and I really couldn't risk not getting a room. When I received the email confirmation, it said, "Room for 2 adults," but I didn't think much of it, and just assumed it was an error due to the language barrier with the hotel guy. I also bought the plane tickets for us around the same time. Fast forward to January, less than a month before the wedding, when my sister-in-law called me crying, saying that Karen had made a mistake with the venue. Apparently, the resort was for adults only, so they didn't allow anyone younger than 16. My son was 13 at the time. I asked her if it would be possible for Leo and me to stay in another hotel, but they told me the whole resort was child-free, so my son wouldn't even be allowed to attend the ceremony or the reception. I was disappointed, and I told my sister-in-law I'd talk to my son about it. I knew how excited he was about his uncle's wedding, but she insisted both her and Jack wanted to tell him in person. Honestly, my son was devastated. He started crying as soon as he was told he wouldn't be able to go. He pleaded with them and even offered to give them all of his savings so they could move the wedding. After 30 minutes of this, my sister-in-law got frustrated and just told him that he was being selfish and that this day wasn't about him. Leo eventually apologized and went to his room. After the wedding, my son just stopped talking to my brother. If Jack sent him a message, Leo would just ignore it unless it had something to do with me. For example, he would only reply if Jack asked him to tell me something because he couldn't reach me, etc. At our family gatherings, Leo would only respond to small questions like, "Can you pass the salt?" or "Help grandma with the plates?" But he would ignore my brother if Jack or Mary tried to start a conversation or ask him about school, etc. A month after the wedding, Jack and Mary offered to take him for a special vacation during spring break to make up for the wedding. But my son just ignored them, and he later told me he didn't want to go with them. It was heartbreaking because I knew how much he wanted to go to that place, and I wasn't able to afford it yet, but he stuck to his guns. Something similar happened on Leo's birthday. He asked me if I was planning to throw him a party. I do it every year, and when I said yes, he asked me not to invite his aunt and uncle. I tried to convince him to invite them because they're family and they were really sorry, but he just said that if they didn't want him on their special day, he didn't want them on his. My brother was crying when I told him he wasn't invited. However, things came to a head this past weekend. We were at my mom's house, and the conversation about Leo's university came up. My mom asked Leo if he was still planning on going to the same university as Jack, and that he should start planning for that, but my son replied that he wasn't interested anymore, and he had chosen to study something else. Then my mom said, "I thought you wanted to be like your uncle," and my son just said, "Why would I want to be like him?" At this point, I intervened and told Leo he didn't have to be so rude, but the damage was already done. Both my brother and sister-in-law heard what he said, and they left shortly after. Last night, my brother texted me saying I was an awful person for letting my son continue with this grudge, and he even accused me of being jealous of their relationship, and that's why I wasn't doing anything to fix it. I just told him these were the consequences of his actions, and that this was 100% his fault by allowing his terrible mother-in-law to plan the wedding when she obviously hated my child. He hung up on me. My mom and some other family members think I should force my son to forgive my brother so we can all move on, claiming there was no ill intent and it was just a small mistake. But I don't think I should. My son was clearly hurt and he should be allowed to heal and forgive them only when he's ready. So, am I the awful person? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You're allowing your son to make decisions over his relationships and his boundaries. Your brother and sister-in-law could take a lesson from him, considering they let themselves be talked into a wedding where one of the people they claim to be incredibly important to them could not come. The only reason they are getting upset is because their guilt is getting too much to bear. They can grow up. Comment 2. So, your son's hurt feelings were nothing to worry about and nothing to change plans about, even plans that the plan holders did not want. But your brother's hurt feelings about a birthday party are enough to get everyone in the family involved, not the jerk. And it sounds like everyone is treating Leo as a kid and not as a whole person with thoughts or feelings. Now, for the update. About 6 months after my son, Leo, cut off his uncle Jack, he's still not over it. It's still messing with his mood so much that he refused to go to a small family barbecue planned for this weekend. This was a big deal because it was supposed to be a family barbecue, and Jack and Mary were going to be there. When Leo told me he didn't want to go, I wasn't surprised. I knew he didn't want to be around Jack, but I still felt like he should be there, even if it was just to hang out with his cousins. I got a text from Jack that day saying he was disappointed that Leo wouldn't join. He mentioned how much he missed Leo and hoped they could talk things through. I figured he'd send something like that, but it still hurt to read it. I decided to try and talk to Leo about it, but he was firm about not going, and that was the end of that convo. I didn't want to push him too much, so I just left it alone. But I did notice that his mood seemed to get worse during the week leading up to the barbecue. I overheard him talking to a friend on the phone, venting about Jack. I didn't want to step in or make things worse, so I just gave him space, hoping that would help him deal with his feelings. The barbecue was pretty standard, though. I watched Jack try to talk to family while occasionally glancing at the empty chair where Leo would have sat. I could see the disappointment on his face. Everyone else was having a good time, but you could tell that Jack was really missing Leo being there. I got a call from Leo's school that night telling me about a minor incident involving his behavior with classmates. I was surprised to hear that he had snapped at a friend during a group project. I couldn't believe it because Leo is usually so chill, and he doesn't really snap at people. At home, I confronted him about the incident, but he just shrugged it off, saying he was tired of everyone asking about Jack. That was when I realized this was really affecting him. I decided to reach out to Jack and let him know about the incident, hoping he could give me some advice. Jack responded with concern and suggested he could talk to Leo, but I hesitated to agree. I didn't want to force Leo into anything, and I knew he wouldn't be happy with me if I did. A few days later, Leo got a surprise package from Jack, containing a book he had wanted for a while. I thought this was a nice gesture on Jack's part, especially since Leo had been wanting this book. But when Leo opened the package and threw it aside, saying he didn't want anything from Jack, it broke my heart a little. I picked up the book and left it on the table, hoping Leo would come around. During dinner that night, he brought up the book, saying he wanted to throw it away. I firmly told him that he should acknowledge Jack's gesture, and that's when the argument started. He accused me of taking Jack's side, insisting that he didn't care about the book or Jack. The argument escalated, and I ended up raising my voice, which is unusual for me. He stormed off to his room and slammed the door. The next day, I decided to have a serious talk with Leo, but he refused to talk. I then suggested we go for ice cream, but he dismissed the idea without even looking up. I was honestly at my wit's end, so I texted Jack to update him on the situation, explaining that things had escalated. He suggested a family dinner to help ease things, but I worried it would only upset Leo more. I finally agreed to the dinner, thinking it could be a step toward fixing things. On the day of the dinner, Leo reluctantly joined, but with a stern warning that he wouldn't be forced to talk to Jack. The dinner took place at a local Italian restaurant where everyone was supposed to meet. During the dinner, Jack tried to talk to Leo, but he only responded with one-word answers. When Leo suddenly stood up, saying he was done and left the table, it escalated even more. I chased after him, who had stormed out of the restaurant and sat on a nearby bench. I tried to reason with him, but he insisted he wanted nothing to do with Jack or the dinner. Back inside, Jack and Mary exchanged worried looks, sensing the situation was getting worse. I returned to the table, where Jack expressed frustration about not being able to reach Leo. I explained that we were trying to respect Leo's feelings, but Jack felt it was unfair to shut him out. I returned home that night to find Leo writing in his journal, a habit he had picked up recently. I couldn't help but notice that his journal was filled with drawings and thoughts about family, including some about Jack. A week later, I got a text from Jack saying he was taking some time away to think about everything. Edit. Leo eventually spoke to me about his feelings, revealing he feels abandoned by Jack for not supporting him. He also admitted jealousy over Jack's kids, which surprised me significantly. Am I the idiot for recording my drunk aunt's violent outburst and sharing it with the family? I am a 31-year-old woman who was born with a severe genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility type. The illness varies greatly from person to person. Most can lead relatively normal lives with some pain and problems. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is essentially a group of disorders caused by defective collagen in the body. This results in a host of issues, including joint hypermobility, which causes joints to be so loose and unstable that they dislocate or subluxate, partially dislocate, constantly. Severe joint and soft tissue pain due to the constant dislocations and the resulting damage to the joints, among other things. Extreme chronic fatigue. Skin that bruises easily and in thin areas can even tear. Dizziness when standing up because my blood pressure drops rapidly. About 11 years ago, my disorder worsened significantly, and I was forced to start using a wheelchair to get around, as walking more than 100 feet became extremely dangerous for me. The risk of falling due to a hip dislocation was high. In the last 3 years, I upgraded to an electric wheelchair because pushing a manual chair became too painful. For reasons I don't fully understand, my aunt, who is 54 years old, has an extreme dislike for disabled people, especially those in wheelchairs who can still move their legs. For 11 years, whenever we were alone, she treated me worse than a dog and insisted that my disorder was completely fake and made up. She claimed I was lying about it because I wanted all the attention focused on me, believing I was jealous of anyone else receiving attention, especially her. I tried to confront her about it and talk things out, but since I was already overwhelmed by my condition, I ended up keeping her comments to myself. Since I'm not confrontational and don't see her often throughout the year, I didn't want to burden anyone with it, especially as I already had to ask for so much help from the people around me, and my parents were exhausted from all the doctor's visits during that time. So, for the past 11 years, I've just ignored every comment she made when we were alone, because I had grown accustomed to it. I absolutely didn't care what she thought at this point and knew she was just being unreasonable. That was until things really escalated last week when I went to visit my aunt for our yearly family dinner. She was the one who organized the dinner this year. All was going well until she drank more than usual and became a lot snarkier toward me in front of the family. This caused some family members to call her out and tell her it was inappropriate and uncalled for. She silently fumed, giving me angry stares afterward. My parents noticed this and kept an eye on her. Unfortunately, at some point, I went into the kitchen on the other side of the house to take a break from my aunt's stares and take my medication in private. My aunt followed me into the kitchen and closed the door behind her. I knew this wasn't good since she was clearly intoxicated, so I discreetly started recording the incident on my phone. Since the door was closed and we were far from the others, with many people talking loudly in the other room, no one could hear us, even if I screamed. My aunt began asking if I was enjoying being an attention hog and ruining her dinner by humiliating her. I slowly tried to maneuver my wheelchair toward the door while apologizing, telling her that wasn't my intention. At that point, I tried to say what she wanted to hear so I could get to safety. She started raising her voice, accusing me of being jealous of her success and faking my disorder out of laziness. She began calling me every name in the book, yelling nonsense at me. I started to think she might be having a mental breakdown and began crying, pleading with her to let me go. Realizing I needed to get out of there, I decided I couldn't do so in my chair, so I tried to get out of it. Unfortunately, she turned violent and pushed me back into the chair hard. She screamed that she wasn't done yet and that liars like me needed to be taught a lesson. She started hitting me in the face as hard as she could, which dislocated my jaw. Then she tried to pull me out of the chair, dislocating my arm, but I fought back, so she failed. She then somehow managed to push my chair over on its side, causing my foot to get stuck behind the footrest. Luckily, my dad, noticing my absence and that my aunt was also gone, became concerned and began searching for me. My father later told me I let out such a blood-curdling scream that it was audible throughout the entire dining room, prompting him and my mom to sprint toward the sound. At this point, I was starting to lose consciousness from the pain. I remember my dad bursting through the door. From what I was told, my dad body slammed my aunt, his younger sister, and punched her to make sure she stayed down. My mom screamed for someone to call 911, which my nephew did immediately. My mom then got me free from the wheelchair and tried to recall her first aid training. Meanwhile, my dad pinned my aunt to the floor while my aunt's husband stood there in complete shock, not knowing what to do. The police and ambulance arrived and they put my aunt in handcuffs. She screamed at my dad, asking how he dared to lay hands on a woman, no less his sister. My uncle then tried to defend my aunt, claiming they didn't know what had happened and that I could have tipped over myself after trying to attack her. He insisted his wife would never do something like this and that it had to be provoked. He apparently said much worse things, but my parents won't specify what exactly. I regained consciousness at this point, likely due to receiving some strong pain medication. It's still a blur because the medication left me disoriented. I was taken away by the ambulance while my aunt was taken to jail. At the hospital, I was found to have multiple fractured ribs, a dislocated arm, and a dislocated jaw. I also suffered a concussion from the punches, but the worst damage was to my foot, which turned out to be broken. I also have cuts and scrapes everywhere because my skin is so fragile. Fortunately, the injuries weren't severe enough to require surgery, but with my disorder, it will take at least 10 weeks in a cast, followed by physical therapy, although my ankle will likely be permanently damaged. I feel guilty for ruining someone's life. I've gotten multiple voicemails from different numbers with her screaming how I ruined her life and probably their finances after this. My uncle is trying to save his own reputation by sticking to my aunt's side, but that's short-lived since he wants a divorce. A few family members are making me doubt if I've done something wrong here, so that's why I'm asking if I'm the unreasonable one. To add, a lot of people don't understand that when you're severely disabled, at least in my case, People will constantly tell you you're at fault for things. That plus past traumatic experiences have made it really difficult for me to even stand up for myself or know when I'm truly at fault for things. It's hard for me to discern when people are just trying to basically manipulate me into believing I'm the cause of the issue. So I hope people will understand a bit better why my mind makes me think I might be at fault for these things. Almost forgot. I ended up sharing the footage on a private group page for our family, for the whole family to see, but it might have been wrong. Seeing the reactions, it was probably the right thing. After that, things hit the fan for her, so that's why she's even angrier. For some of the questions, yes, we're getting a restraining order and pressing charges. The thought of her coming after me is too much. For people wondering how I was given pain medication when I wasn't conscious. As I said, I think I regained consciousness due to pain medication, but I don't remember a lot of what happened due to the pain. But I'll ask my parents when I got the medication. My parents are reluctant to talk about how they found me and what happened because they'd rather have those memories buried instead of haunting me. The footage was handed over to the police and is backed up on multiple platforms. I'm currently thinking I'm going to sue since I have insurance that covers legal costs for me. In summary, my aunt ended up putting me in the hospital and severely injuring me because she thinks I'm faking my genetic disorder to get attention. I recorded the whole attack and put it online after they tried to say I'm lying and I attacked her. Now everyone in our family has gone no contact, even her church. Her husband wants to divorce her. So am I the unreasonable one for posting it online and ruining her life? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Is your dad's hand okay? You could probably post the video and alongside it the bronze cast of his fist. Sell the bronze cast as a vase or to be worshipped high on an altar. Proceeds to go towards legal fees or continued research for your genetic disorder. Just a thought. Wishing you a speedy recovery. Comment 2. Damn, your aunt sucks. If your uncle or other family members try to use the family card, show them that video you made about it. Plus, personally, I would sue her for the damages, including hospital bills. Wish you a speedy recovery from Holland. Now, for the update. It's been 2 weeks since my aunt went all MMA fighter on me. She's still in jail, waiting for her court date. My parents are trying to support me, but the vibe in their house isn't great. Every day, my phone is blowing up with family members asking for updates. One day, I decided to share more footage of the incident because I was tired of people making assumptions. It made things worse. My uncle texted me saying he was embarrassed by my actions. Like, seriously? You're embarrassed? Family members are now divided. Some support me, while others are coming for my head. My aunt's husband reached out saying he's devastated by everything. He mentioned plans to move out, citing the chaos. I mean, I get it, but come on. I got a call from my cousin who said my aunt is claiming she was provoked. The family dinner next week is already planned. It feels so awkward thinking about it. I was invited to my friend's birthday party, but declined. I just didn't want to face questions about my aunt or the whole incident. My parents suggested I go to a family therapy session. I refused, wanting to avoid discussing my aunt with the family. Her friends started sending me messages, defending her. I blocked several of them after they accused me of ruining her life. That's when I decided to hire a lawyer to discuss my options for a restraining order. My aunt's husband invited me to coffee to talk things over. I agreed, thinking a conversation might ease the tension. He showed up looking stressed and frazzled at a local cafe. The man just looked super stressed. He said my aunt feels isolated and wants to apologize. I told him it's too soon for me to even consider that. He mentioned how my aunt is struggling in jail without support. After the meeting, my parents urged me to reconsider the legal action. I explained my worries about her possibly coming back after me. My cousin organized a family BBQ, hoping to bring everyone together. I almost didn't go, but my parents insisted it was important. The atmosphere was so awkward, with whispers and sideways glances. My aunt's husband showed up, looking uncomfortable. He made a toast about family, which felt forced and awkward. Then I received a text from my aunt, saying she wants to talk when she's out. I didn't respond, knowing I need to focus on my safety. My cousin revealed that some family members are discussing disowning my aunt. I decided to take a step back from family gatherings for now. The situation with my aunt escalated into a family crisis. I told my parents I'm cutting ties for my own well-being. They respected my decision, though it felt heavy in the room. Edit. It's been a hectic time. My aunt's court date is coming up, and I'm feeling anxious about it. I've decided to attend for closure. The family barbecue helped a bit, but I'm still taking a break from gatherings. Am I the idiot for exposing my wife's affairs and destroying her reputation after she tried to paint me as an absent father? My wife Cynthia got pregnant against my will after we had discussed and agreed on not having any more kids. We already have an 18-year-old daughter, a 13-year-old son, an 8-year-old son, and a 4-year-old son. I was scheduled for a vasectomy. She claimed she was on the pill, but I was using condoms because I wanted to make sure nothing happened. I had my vasectomy, but she was pregnant a few weeks later. She was overjoyed, and I wasn't. I didn't want to be an old dad. She claimed the pills didn't work. I never pushed for her to get surgery because I know it's harder for women, and she said injectable contraceptives hurt her health. I checked all my condoms, and all of them had been pierced. We had a huge argument that ended with her crying. My trust has been destroyed. I assume that nothing she says is true. She also got fired when she was 3 months pregnant. I found it weird that she didn't fight it. Then she said she needed to stay home, which is exactly what I dreaded. She said morning sickness was too bad to go to work. For our entire 18 years of marriage, she has pushed to be a stay-at-home mom. We can't afford it. She gave me the silent treatment for weeks after our second child was born when I said she needed to find a job. I never heard the end of it, as she calls it, when I made her leave our baby and sent her to get a job, like I had ripped her away from our kid. I got suspicious, thinking that perhaps she had resigned and was lying. I know it's wrong, but I looked into her phone. Long story short, she had a workplace affair, and she and her affair partner both got fired. She slept with him during her training out of state and eventually scheduled every assignment out of town to cheat with him. He is in his late 50s and married. She also slept with my cousin's son, Nelson, and he's a drug addict. I saw and heard messages between them. He would come to my house when I was out. I asked the neighbor, and they confirmed it. My neighbor said Nelson would show up sometimes 2 days in a row when I was out. I checked my schedule, and it could have been when I went to Ohio for 3 weeks. I came home on weekends, but everything seemed normal. What's worse is that Nelson calls me uncle. I let him stay over a couple of times. She also used our own kids, our 2 youngest, as leverage, promising that he could see them if he didn't pressure her and kept his mouth shut. So she obviously put him in some type of stepdaddy role. She told him the pregnancy was his baby. I hate him, but I think she manipulated him because he has zero relationship with his parents or his siblings, and he kept texting her about how she was like home to him. I lost it and woke her up. She tried to claim that she was sexually attacked by both men, then said she was pressured into it because they threatened her. I confronted both men. I reached out to her ex-coworker via social media, but he blocked me after a couple of exchanged messages. Nelson did get belligerent, and it could have probably ended in a real fight if I had him in front of me. The paternity test came back negative. I moved out and got a lawyer. I refused to be at the hospital during childbirth. It was a stillborn. I was shocked. Even if it wasn't mine, it felt dark and strange. I offered my kids emotional support but didn't allow her to cry to me. I had to get a court order to get a DNA test on all our kids. They are mine. A few weeks ago, people on Facebook started asking questions and attempting to call me out for not posting anything about the baby. I think she might have told someone that I wasn't present at childbirth because a couple of people came at me. We are getting a divorce, and I'm very angry that she's still trying to milk it. I told each person the truth separately, but eventually got fed up with looking like the bad guy and wrote a post saying thank you to everyone who has reached out to insult me, but the baby was not my child as per the paternity test. I had to step away from social media because of it. Her family called me asking me to take it down. They didn't know the full story, but said this is not how things get solved. I'm not deleting it, despite being called out for slut-shaming. While I worked hard for our family, she was texting her best friend and complaining about how I'm not the shadow of my former self, how I look old and let myself go. Her friend had an angry response, but they are not on speaking terms anymore. Cynthia claimed that her friend ghosted her and she doesn't know why. I'm suing for custody since she repeatedly took my kids across the state so that Nelson could hang out with them and left them with her dad before I came home from work so that she could go do work stuff and have intimacy outside of our marriage. She had been begging me not to ever tell the kids about the paternity test, but they needed to know the truth before she twisted the narrative. My daughter won't speak to her, and our second child wants to come live with me. I'm sick of crying sporadically because sometimes I'm driving and can't hold it in. I can't even watch adult films because she and her affair partners come to mind. I had a family, and despite everything, I was proud and happy, and she took it away. I didn't know she saw me as less. She told her ex-best friend that she loved watching the executives in her job. At least her friend defended me, although we are not close. My lawyer says we should contact her as a character witness. I hate Cynthia, and I told her during her pregnancy when she wanted to initiate intimacy. She's naturally overweight, and I loved her as such, but I hated the knocked up by the affair partner version of her. I told her she looked grotesque like Jabba the Hutt. Her lawyer is pushing for family counseling. I would only agree to civil co-parenting, but nothing oriented at couples reconciliation nonsense. She calls it a mistake, but to me, she bred via infidelity and created an entire human being, and I will never forget that. Am I the bad guy for refusing to take my post down? Am I the bad guy for refusing to show compassion? All I want is to get out of her life, and I feel like she's trying to keep me from moving on. Sorry if I don't make too much sense, but my mind is still foggy. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the jerk. So long as she is spinning a false narrative, you should feel free to defend your own reputation. To anyone demanding you take that down, ask her to post the truth instead, and you will no longer need to defend yourself. It also seems like there are many aspects to this situation, and you have been holding back damning details you could describe. She truly betrayed you and the life and family you both built. Comment 2, not the jerk. Your wife's infidelity and deceit justify your anger and lack of compassion. Your social media post was a valid response to unfair judgment. Now for the update. My kids' school called me a couple of weeks after my last post about a parent-teacher meeting. I went because I wanted to hear what was going on with the kids. I was worried about how the divorce was affecting them. When I got there, the teachers started telling me about some troubling behavior from my ex during school events. Apparently, she had been a little too involved at the school and was always showing up at events. She was also kind of handsy with other parents, which was really weird to hear. When the teachers were telling me all this, I casually mentioned I hadn't seen her since the separation. They exchanged these looks between each other and said that she had been overly involved in the kids' lives, often bringing up issues about our family. I remember she was always overstepping with other parents. Like, she was on this community board for planning school events, even though she wasn't a parent there anymore. I started to feel uneasy about it all. I went to the community center where the board was located. When I got there, I found flyers promoting a fundraiser organized by her aimed at supporting single parents. The fundraiser mentioned that she was going to share her story about her struggles as a single mother. I was shocked to see my name listed as an absent father. I couldn't believe it. I texted her to confront her about the fundraiser, but she just dismissed me and continued promoting the event. A week later, I got a message from a parent I didn't know who expressed sympathy for her situation. This parent mentioned how inspiring her story was and how they were donating to the cause. At the event, I noticed a lot of parents were there, and they were all rallying around her. I quietly listened to her speech and couldn't believe how she made me look like I didn't care and wasn't involved. She twisted the truth in front of a crowd. I was so angry. After her speech, I walked up to her, but she quickly brushed me off and continued chatting with her supporters. I snapped a few photos of her interacting with the other parents to document her behavior. I decided to share my side of the story through a video on social media. The video included snippets of her speech, along with clips of our family life before the separation. I posted the video during the peak of the fundraiser. It drew a lot of attention. Her supporters were shocked to hear my perspective. It led to a wave of comments. The backlash against her grew, with many parents expressing their disappointment. She tried to defend herself online, but only made things worse. The more she argued, the more people sided with me. A few days later, the school board reached out to me about the incident. They informed me they would be reviewing the situation after several complaints regarding her conduct. I also got a visit from a community leader who wanted to mediate a discussion about co-parenting. During the meeting, she showed up visibly angry and tried to take control. The community leader listened to both sides but ultimately sided with me. With evidence of her behavior and the online fallout, the community leader suggested that more oversight was needed with her. The school board decided to limit her access to school functions until further notice. This whole thing with her has been a mess, but the dynamics have shifted in my favor. I feel like I'm finally waking up from a really long nap. I didn't even realize how deep in denial I was about her and how bad things were. It's like you guys helped me snap out of it and see that I deserve so much better. It feels good to finally be on my own side instead of making excuses for her behavior. I still have a lot to deal with, but I'm ready to face it head on. Just wanted to say a big thanks for everyone who commented and helped me out. Take care. Edit. The community leader suggested some counseling for us to help figure out co-parenting. I was hesitant but agreed because it was a condition for her to keep her distance from school events. We went to a few sessions, and I was open and honest. She played along at first, but it was clear she didn't genuinely care. The therapist saw through her facade and suggested she take a break from the kids to focus on herself. She got really angry and left. I have full access to the kids now, and they feel more comfortable. We're making progress. Thanks for the support. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.